Hi everyone, welcome to our Birthing Bonds session. This is a platform to raise awareness and empower moms on issues of birthing, lactation and mindful parenting. So the idea of Birthing Bonds itself came to me and has been on my mind for a long time. Meghna, I was also telling you about my own birthing story. So from then on, as a new mom, pregnancy is like a very new thing, right? Like you get you really don't know what's happening to your body, and you're totally dependent on your doctor, your friend circle, whose friends maybe who are pregnant or have a kid, your own mother. So you kind of trust the information about pregnancy and what is happening with yourself. And of course, now there are a lot of apps. You must be knowing that. What I used to do was every week I would log in. Like okay, what is at 6 weeks? What is at 7 weeks? What is the size of the fetus? And it's interesting that they used to call it the size of a chickpea, size of a poppy seed. That's how it grows to size of papaya. Things
Yes.
like that. That's the kind of information we get. So apart from that, I did attend my Lamas classes, kind of, where they trained us little bit on physical postures and breath awareness and things like that. But still, when my water broke, all I felt was fear. Let me be very frank. I was really scared of what and how the birth is going to be. And even though I read about birth affirmations, I was reading up a little bit to myself and things like that, but I knew I was not at all prepared. I had an emergency C-section due to due to other reasons, which might not be still clear to me. But so I was of the mind. So I realized that I had not prepared for birth very well, and this keeps happening to me. So whenever I meet moms during our shoots, I get the same feeling. We don't have enough information. We don't know what are our birthing choices, and we are not mentally prepared enough as to what can be done at that time.
Absolutely.
So this was the idea behind Birthing Bonds, and I hope to reach out with this initiative with folks like you who know a lot about in this area, to reach out to women to make birthing more beautiful for all of them. Okay,
Right.
so guys, so here we have Meghna with us. Meghna is a co-founder of Birth Home, which he started with three other women, Chetna, Sneha, and Shafgupta, who are like really passionate about empowering women about their birthing choices and also respecting it during your birth. And Birth Home is Bangalore's first comprehensive birthing and midwifery care center. It's located in JP Nagar. They provided services related to antenatal, birthing, and postpartum care. All these services are provided, which I think Meghna will explain a little bit more in detail. Birth Home is also supported by the founding members and the complete, whoever is behind the Bangalore Birth Network, a lot of experienced guys. So when Birth Home opened, I was like really excited that something like this was happening in Bangalore, because I have heard about one in Cochin, I think Birth Village. And so this was something that was really due in Bangalore and very much needed for today's women. So, Meghna, I think you are an architect by profession, and but got into this entire journey because of your own pregnancy challenges and kind of finding the care provided during that time. That's what you had told me. So we would first love to hear about a little bit more about yourself, your family, and how you guys started Birth Home. How did the idea come into being?
All right. So I did have like a 180-degree change of my career, and that was around the time of my own birth. I was actually a practicing architect. I was, well into like the busy life of a typical architect in Bangalore, all the way up to my 7th or 8th month in pregnancy. And my original idea was that I would take a little bit of a break after that, and probably, like I'm sure any new mom thinks, after a little while, after spending enough time with the baby, I'd go back to my profession. I found it very challenging to be at home after my birth. I will talk a little bit about, what was the journey of finding a doctor and how my birth was. But for me, the biggest point was I was finding it very challenging to be at home because all I had was this new baby to keep me company, and all that new baby wanted was to nurse 24/7. And that's really when I started, thinking a lot more about my journey towards pregnancy and my decisions leading up to my birth. And, of course, each of us does the best we can in any given situation.
Yes.
We literally can't do better than our best, right? When you have a certain piece of information, you use it. But if you don't have access to information, and if you don't have access to, the right kind of care providers, what are you supposed to do? And I felt like that was my biggest struggle, where I knew I wanted a natural birth. I had all of this research and all of this discussion around why birthing naturally is, really ideal for your baby, for your body, for, your emotional state, your mental state. But there was literally no option in Bangalore. And I had heard about other birth centers. There's 4 birth centers totally in the country, and we are the 4th. I had heard about other birth centers, but we didn't have any in Bangalore. And I just felt like I could only do so much being a pregnant mom. I couldn't really think of uprooting my entire life in Bangalore and moving to a different city. So I did give birth in a hospital. And when I was back home with my new baby, that was the time where I really started thinking about what birth looks like in the city. And that started my journey with birth. I joined then an organization called Bangalore Birth Network, which I think you are definitely familiar with them, Shamla. They're an NGO that's been advocating for normal birth in the city for a very long time now. This is like more than 10-12 years in the making, where it started off so slow, so small, where it was just a group of women who came together to then start thinking about how can we make birth better in the city. And now it's grown to like almost like this big movement where they're able to spread a lot of awareness about birth and reach out to a lot of different people. So I joined Bangalore Birth Network. I worked with them for a few years, and then a small group of us, all of who had met at Bangalore Birth Network, we then started this journey of starting the birth home. And that is now I call it my second baby, and
Second
I'm sure
child.
all my partners, yes, all my partners feel the same way, where it's our little startup where we are the co-founders, we are the co-owners, and we are all mothers who've given birth. We all know what it feels like to be a pregnant woman in the city and not feel like you don't have any options. And this is our little answer to that there is an alternative to just going to a doctor and just going to a hospital. And I'll talk a little bit more about who should reach out to the birth home and who are the clients who we can accept under our care.
Yeah. And that's nice. I mean, it's really great to start off like that with a set of like-minded folks. So you did mention about your birth in the city. So any challenges that you faced? How was your birth? Like I said that mine was like quite fearful. So how was yours, and what do you think? Because each mother has a different birthing story. So how was yours?
Mine was a mixed bag. Right from the beginning, I knew that I was going to keep looking for that place that felt just right for me. And thankfully, I didn't have any qualms about changing doctors or changing places, which I do see a lot of young couples having. That they're not very happy with the care that they're receiving, but they also think that they shouldn't be changing doctors or they shouldn't be asking questions. Thankfully, me and my partner, we got a lot of support. We didn't have any people telling us why you're changing so many doctors or you shouldn't change doctors. So we did go through a series of people.
How many? Wow. Okay.
I think the number's a bit scary. I've definitely considered, I think as a serious count, I have changed at least 4 doctors minimum.
Okay.
And there were strong reasons behind that. For example, there was one doctor with whom I was talking about which hospital would be right for my birth. And I was just a couple of months pregnant at that time. And I remember this doctor telling me, oh, you should choose hospital A versus hospital B because hospital A has bigger corridors to walk in after your C-section. And somehow, to me, that, it's such a simple statement, but that was just ringing alarm bells. Alarm bells were going off in my head because I didn't want a provider who, with almost, certainty was telling me that it is so likely for me to have a C-section. I think the casualty with which, the casualness with which she said that, really scared me. That was really worrisome for me, and I just ran from that consult. And I did find other doctors who, were quite honest and straightforward and said, what you are looking for, I won't do. My process is, I do standard X and standard Y and standard Z. If you are looking for this, you should go to someone else. And I actually appreciated that honesty a lot more than someone who would disregard me and say, that's not an important question. So I would much rather, I think I would trust a care provider who would be very honest with me and say, this is within my scope and my skill set and this isn't. So I went through that journey and finally, did find a doctor who I found was very, very responsive. She was listening to me and I could see that. And, this memory I have, I've probably recounted it so many times to so many pregnant couples. There was one point where we apologized to the doctor. We said, I'm sorry, doctor, we're asking you so many questions. I know that, you're busy. Because that's the feeling we have, right? Women are so apologetic about asking questions. Like even in the birth home, we are constantly hearing things like, sorry, we have one more question. And if you don't mind, we have one more question. I feel that you are a pregnant woman and you're growing this baby. You are the center of care. You shouldn't be apologetic about asking questions. You shouldn't be made to feel bad about asking questions. But it's so ingrained that, I did say to the doctor that we're sorry we're asking you so many questions. And this doctor put her pen and her little notebook aside and said, you know what, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to answer your questions.
That's nice.
That's really nice, which sealed the deal for me. And I went with her, and for most part I was very happy with her care, but at the end of the day I did birth in a hospital, and there are certain considerations that come into place when you're choosing a doctor in a hospital, and there are certain considerations when you're choosing a midwife and a birth center, and these two models can't be the same because they are so inherently different. We don't want to vilify doctors. We don't want to demonize hospitals and say, there's this popular opinion that everyone has, right? That doctors just do this for money. I think that is just very unfair and quite wrong. There is so much more to, designing care for someone than just money. Maybe that's true in some cases. I'm not disregarding, the experiences of someone who has in fact experienced that. But in most parts, in a hospital with a doctor, they are so pressed for time and resources. They are caring for hundreds of women in their care. You go into the OPD, you'll see that the doctor is seeing 40 or 50 women in a day. How are you possibly supposed to humanize care? I think there's so much that has to change about the system, and we can't hold one person responsible for how the whole system is running. We ourselves feed into that system where, even if it's a small thing, even if your doctor's telling you that this is the situation, we always want to have like the best possible care that transcends all expectations, and you want to have like everyone wants to be in this perfectly designed hospital, and everyone's wanting like perfectly designed prenatal care, which is great, but we have to recognize the limitations of any model. And I think one of the limitations of the hospital model is that it is very hard in a hospital to offer personalized care, and that is exactly where midwives and birth centers come in. If we can reimagine this entire situation to look like all women get prenatal care with a midwife, where a midwife is then able to really sit down with them for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, even even longer than that, as long as it requires to really help them through that particular consult. And when there is need for acute care, when there is need for more medicalized care, then they go to a doctor. If we can just look at the system that way, that is a win-win for everyone. Doctors have a better work-life balance. Midwives are able to help a lot more women, through the process of birth. And we are using each professional's skills and expertise only when they are required.
So
I think
how? No, that's fine. So how does this process work, Meghna? So how, like, what do you think? What do you refer by? First of all, natural birth. What are the options that exist? So what all is natural birth? Because there's water birth that I've heard of recently. And how does that process work during a natural birth? Like moms approach you guys, and how do you take them through the process? And even during labor, this thing between the midwife and when to go to the doctor, how is the balance kind of achieved with your care?
Okay, I'm going to separate your question into 3 different parts.
Yes.
The first thing is, there is, water birth is a tool. It is not a way to give birth. I, in fact, just had a conversation with someone about this in quite detail where, if we look at hypnobirthing, birthing in water, we look at moving around freely during labor, squatting, using any position that you want, doula care. All of these are tools that you use during birth. It is not a way to give birth because you are supposed to give birth the way you want to, in a manner that is safe, and your body knows what is safe. Women in labor know that sometimes they want water, and even if they've chosen to use the water birth, maybe in labor they've decided not to. So water birthing isn't something exotic. It isn't something completely different from the way women give birth. It is just a tool that is very, very helpful for you to give birth. So that's what I have to say about water birthing and hypnobirthing. What does natural birth mean?
Yeah, how does it happen? Yeah, because C-section, I'm very clear. Like you go, so like whatever has happened, or people even fix dates and go, and then there is a surgery and you come out. So in natural birthing, what happens? How do you help? Making the entire process easier.
So in midwifery care, there are a few key principles that make up midwifery care. Adequate and frequent prenatal checkups is one of it. I'm using the word checkup because that's something we are more familiar with, but what it really is like, a time to meet. It's a consult where your midwife will of course be examining all the parameters of your health, making sure, baby's growth is on track, making sure the mother's health parameters are on track. If there's anything that needs to, be adjusted in terms of supplements sometimes, in terms of monitoring blood levels, we do that. And it is also an opportunity for the pregnant couple to then talk about whatever it is that they are dealing with. Maybe there is a symptom that they thought was too small to share, or maybe they've just been told that, yeah, this happens during pregnancy, it's completely common. And they just don't think about it. But we always encourage them to talk about it, because each conversation we have with a pregnant client gives us that much more information about who they are, what they're experiencing, what their pregnancy is looking like. All that information which is very, very helpful for us to care for them during the birth itself. So prenatal consults are a very important part of midwifery care. We see our clients once in 4 weeks for most part of their pregnancy. Then we see them every 2 weeks, coming closer to the 7th and the 8th month. And in the last month of their pregnancy, we see them once a week. So this frequency is something that gives us a lot of the information that we need to then help a client through their labor and through their birth.
Nice.
In terms of how a C-section works and how natural birth works, again, I have to say it's not an exotic concept. Here, we are just trying to make sure we are adhering to what the body is naturally capable of doing, giving it that safe and supported environment within which it needs to do that, with the reassurance that there is a medical professional. Your midwife is right there with you if there is need for any kind of support. We call birth a natural physiological process, a normal physiological process, that babies are born in any kind of situation. Babies don't just stop coming, just because something, just because you are in a particular kind of situation. And that is very, very true for the pandemic situation that we are dealing with right now. Babies continue to be born, mothers continue to give birth. However, how you're made to feel during birth and how you feel after birth, that is what we are protecting. Babies are born one way or the other, but how does the mother feel, during the whole process? What are the health impacts of the way you've given birth? For example, C-section is a major surgery. Yes, it is a life-saving operation, but we are supposed to use it only when absolutely necessary. We are not going to start doing routine heart surgeries, right? You don't, because you know that it's a major surgery. So it's a little concerning, the casualness again with which we talk about a C-section. I think that is really concerning, and that is something that needs to change.
Yeah, so that gets me to the next question. So many of my friends, all of us had a first baby as C-section. So the second one is obviously doctor's advice that you should go for a C-section. Second thing, many couples and even mums just feel that C-section is so much more predictable. You can go get admitted and you're given all pain-free medicines, and it's much more calmer. Like people play, your husband is let in, people play music during that time. It's kind of pain-free because you're like, you know what is happening to you. So there are a lot of mums opting for it. And even like I got some questions as to, is really natural birth better, and how is it better than C-section when we feel that that's more predictable and calmer?
Right. I think we all hear a lot of birth stories, but unfortunately, most of them are filled with the fear or filled with medical interventions and are, high risk and highly medicalized. Those are the birth stories that we hear the most often, that, XYZ happened and which is why I needed to have a C-section. It's really unfortunate that we don't hear enough stories about natural birth to kind of balance the both out. Both are experiences, and both, for anyone who's had a C-section, you can't walk up to them and hold them responsible and say, you had a C-section, that's really bad for you and you should have had natural birth. It's so unethical to say that. But we also should be hearing a lot more stories about natural birth, and that will then change or shift the balance to a much more even keel. I feel that's the biggest, problem right now, that women are hearing constantly of other women who've had C-sections, who found them to be pain-free, who found them to be, quite easy or quite convenient. We don't hear enough from the women who've had really painful experiences in, post-surgery, or who've had C-sections literally shoved down their throats, even though they didn't want one. We talk to so many people who contact us who are probably sometimes not even pregnant, but they've had a first C-section and they just want to know, is there a gentler option available for me before I even think of having a baby? Because if there isn't, then I don't want to plan for a second baby. I don't want to relive what I went through the first time. There are, instances where we hear about women getting really feeling extremely anxious and stressed out and threatened because they have been told that they have to have a C-section within the next half an hour. They've probably gone into their doctor's office, for a checkup, but they've been told that no, this is an emergency, you have to have a C-section. And unfortunately, when we hear the surgery stories or the post-birth stories, sometimes we feel that we see clearly that it was an unnecessary C-section. And that is really unfortunate. Why should a woman have to go through major surgery and experience so much stress and anxiety if it is unnecessary? If C-section is a life-saving surgery, then shouldn't it only be used when there is an absolute medical necessity? And not because it's more convenient, and not because it's more easy, and not because there were all of these myths that were floating around that they didn't have more information about. A very simple example is cord around the neck. A majority of the C-sections happen
Yeah,
because the parents have been told that there's a cord around the neck at 32 weeks or at 34 weeks or at 35 weeks, which is just so early on. If you start worrying about a cord around the neck at 32 weeks, are we forgetting that baby is floating in water and that baby is bound to move and that the cord is also bound to move, and what you may have in fact captured is one angle in a scan where the baby had a cord around the neck, and that in the next minute, if you were to take a scan again, the cord won't be around the neck. First, that's the first point, that, you know, even just having it in a scan, capturing it on a scan doesn't mean that baby has a cord around the neck. The next point is it really dangerous if a baby has a cord around the neck, or when is it dangerous? In most cases, I won't get into the, you know, details of exactly which situation cord around the neck is scary or, you know, or an emergency, because that is so complicated and that can only be diagnosed in labor. But when you're talking about cord around the neck that's been detected at 32 weeks or 33 weeks, at the 32 or 33 week scan, the cord is a soft, gelatinous, you know, a long cord. It is not a tight cord, or is it not? It's not a sharp cord or a you know, a hard material. And having the cord around the neck is not going to stop the baby from breathing, because the baby is not breathing through the nose and the throat in the womb. The baby gets everything through the placenta. Through the cord. And as long as baby is doing well and baby's, you know, kick rate is good, heartbeat is good, all of, you know, parameters are good and mother's doing well, it is not an emergency. It is not a problem. Exactly. There are very, very few cases, very, very few instances during which a cord around the neck is actually a problem, but that does not equate to us seeing 70 or 80% of the people being told that baby has a cord around the neck and hence needs to be a C-section. So when C-sections are performed for instances like this, when it is clearly not an emergency situation and you can see clearly that the couple is being pressurized into a C-section and many times not being given the right information as well, then I wouldn't really say that it is a convenient choice, nor would I say it is the easy choice. There are, you know, there was a friend of mine who was pregnant with me at the same time, and we were going through the whole process together, and unfortunately she was also told in a doctor's consult, very similar to, you know, what I just said, that sure, it's, you know, we can wait and try for a natural birth, but your baby is at risk, and it is, if something happens, then I'm not responsible for it. It's your decision. That is so unfair. You are a care provider. How are you able to just say it is not my responsibility if something happens? If you don't listen to me, your baby may die. Once you hear this sentence, there is no expectant parent that would want to say, you know, sure, we'll still take our decision. This is famously called the death card. Once the death card is played, it's like all logic will just exit from the conversation, and you are just making decisions based on fear and not based on information. So I see, you know, message that says C-section is not a painless process. It is a major surgery involving multiple risks. Absolutely true. Strenuous recovery process, which is again something that we know about. We know that women struggle more after a C-section, but as with everything else, we are told that sure, it is painful, but you know what, in a few days you'll be fine, so don't worry about it.
You're that also doped with a lot of medicine, so.
Exactly, and it is not true that you'll be fine in a few days. We have women coming to us years after their C-section, still presenting with backache, who've received little to no postpartum care, little to no postpartum support. They have never been in to see a physiotherapist, and they've just been living with that backache for years and years. We have such amazing people available in the world of medicine. You know, one of my partners at the birth home, co-founder of the birth home, Sneha Shah, is a physiotherapist, and she has magic fingers. She can, you know, help women out even if they're a few years postpartum with all these issues of pain that we just tend to ignore. So really C-section doesn't really just stop at the operating table. It is an experience that we kind of carry with us for years and years and
for many years. No, I have
Yes.
heard many women, complaining of backache after C-section. I guess sometimes if you probably take care immediately after the surgery, or if you're a little young, your recovery is a little faster. But yeah, a lot of people complain of backache after C-section.
Yeah, again, it's a yeah. It's really a mixed bag. I think again, this is kind of a myth that if you don't take care of yourself enough after a C-section, then you'll have backache that goes on and on. You could do everything right in the world, but please remember that you've still had major surgery. It is not on you. It is not on you to dictate exactly how the body will recover. I think we have to stop putting, the onus on women to be completely in charge for their medical care, and that if anything goes wrong, then it's only their responsibility. No, it is a shared responsibility. It is a responsibility shared between the couple to begin with, and then between the couple and your care provider. No one person is solely responsible for any event.
True. So again, it gets back to like how you're saying the fear card. I think it's about our complete understanding of what birth is. We hear more about C-section. I mean, we read about it, but we really don't know what exactly a natural process involves and how we can make it better. You're not reading about it much wherever, and of course, the number of birth centers are also very, very low. The kind of care that you guys are giving. One more question I also had in mind. Again, I was already telling you about it. For any second-time mom, many of them who have had a C-section, the first thing the doctor says is that you have to go for a C-section again if you're pregnant.
Yeah.
So this is told to you much in advance when you have the first C-section itself. And the second time you go also, like they sometimes tell you, 5% we'll try for normal, but why do you want to take the risk for a normal delivery? So that's where I think VBAC comes in. So if you can tell us a bit more about VBAC, what are the risks associated, or are there any risks? Is that a better one to go for, the second time?
Yeah. So VBAC is, for those who are unfamiliar with the term, a vaginal birth after a first C-section. When we talk about VBAC, we have to talk about it with the context of another step, which is called TOLAC, which is a trial of labor after a first C-section. So VBAC is the actual process where you actually have a vaginal birth, right? Where you've had a C-section and you actually have a vaginal birth. What is really important to know here, that international recommendations are of TOLAC, which should be mandatorily available to women. All women should be given a trial of labor after a first C-section. That a first C-section by itself, without any other complications, a first C-section by itself is not a complicating factor to then stop a woman from even having a trial of labor. I think this is a great first step, because when we start talking about VBAC, when we start talking about the end result of it, it feels very overwhelming and it feels like a big decision to make. But if we break it down into smaller pieces, if you are a healthy pregnant woman without any other complications, and you've had a healthy pregnancy without any other complications, then international standards say that you should be given a trial of labor. Now that trial of labor may result in a vaginal birth. There's a very high chance of it resulting in a vaginal birth, but even if it's not, even if it has to be a repeat C-section, your body has still experienced labor. And this is not just a feel-good factor to say, oh, I've experienced labor, I've like ticked off my bucket list. No, experiencing labor is very important for the body, because it then tells your uterus that, this is how you contract. This is how you contract back into shape after having carried a baby for 9 months. This reduces postpartum complications by a great deal. This can also stop other, things like postpartum hemorrhages from happening. When the uterus already knows how to contract, it knows how to go back to its original shape. Postpartum recovery is a lot better. So when we talk about VBAC, I always like to talk about it in the context of a TOLAC, which is a trial of labor after a C-section. VBAC in itself, like I said, is the desirable end result, that what we are working towards is a vaginal birth after a C-section. And just like with a first-time mother who wants a natural birth, and whoever it is, whatever context you're coming from, if you want a vaginal birth, we are going to work towards it. What happens at the end of the day is not something that you can control. And that is also something that women should remember, that just because they want a VBAC doesn't mean that they're solely responsible for it. They definitely deserve a trial of labor if there are no other complications, and that is what they should be asking their doctors or their care providers. If you go to a doctor or a care provider and say, I absolutely want a vaginal birth, can you confirm to me that it will happen? No care provider worth their salt will say, yes, I can assure it to you. However, that also doesn't mean we, completely disregard the entire prenatal care process and leave it to the side. We will work together. We will work together to the best possible extent to get the best possible result.
Nice. Okay.
That's what I have to say about VBAC. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Okay. So moving on. So any special birth story that you would like to share? I mean, anything special that's close to your heart? Something that you've witnessed? Something beautiful?
I can share a small snippet from a recent birth that I was lucky to be a part of the birth team. This was a long labor, and at every point, in frequent points during the labor, the birth team members, the birth assistant, the midwife, we kind of would catch each other's eye and we would keep wondering, my gosh, how is she going on? This looks so hard. This looks so difficult. But each time we felt like, okay, we are hitting, kind of a roadblock, and we don't know if she will have the energy to push through that point as well. This amazing woman seemed to dig deep into some unending reserve of energy and just kept filling herself with more and more energy as the process kept unfolding, which was amazing to witness. I mean, you always hear about this, right? That women are strong, women's bodies are strong, and we have a transformative power that we have within us, which comes into play during labor, that you will have, unlimited energy to actually do that. But we could see all of that coming together in this exact process. We could see that her partner, her husband staying by her side was, contributing so much to it. We could see her trust in her care provider. Yes, her trust in the care provider, her feeling safe and secure in the birth environment that was in. All of these as contributing factors, but she did have unlimited energy, and she kept drawing on that source of energy, which was, I'm not going to forget that experience, I think, for the rest of my life.
Like Akshaya Patra of food.
Absolutely. You couldn't have compared that to a better example. Yes.
Nice. Yeah, nice. Because usually after a child comes, there's no energy. We always feel like, we're like done. For some time, it's quite hectic.
Yes, absolutely. And you are completely within your rights to feel tired, to feel vulnerable, to feel, to want to be taken care of. But I have to say, again, in the spirit of making sure there are enough good stories to balance out the not so good ones, you hear of so many women who've experienced natural birth who again have this sudden surge of energy, which is completely scientific. Your body is flooded with feel-good hormones that are giving you that extra boost of energy, and they feel euphoric, they feel on top of the world. And you see the difference that makes when they don't have to feel like they're fighting their care provider, when they're fighting through every step of the labor to get what they want. That is exhausting. Birth is not exhausting. Birth is exhausting physically in other ways, and of course it is a big challenge to keep your energy reserves going mentally, emotionally, and physically. But when you add to it this whole factor that you have to, struggle in the birth environment that you're in, I think that just completely leaves the woman, spent and completely done.
And also the feeling of not being understood properly, right, as to what you're communicating, and it's just not paying heed to it. I guess that will also pull people down. So, so is for any expectant mums, Meghna, what is it that, what are the 3 things, or what are the important things that you would say would calm their mind during the birth? Are there some techniques that they can use, something that you can quickly tell us? So to any expected mom that is joined,
Yeah, I know we are talking about tips to use during the birth, but
Yeah.
let's please remember that it is quite hard to magically change something that is happening during birth. For example, if you're feeling more tired and you're feeling like your muscles, your body is not, able to work with you in birth, that's not your fault. That's because you need to start working on that from a very, very early point in pregnancy. It's not that suddenly magically you're able to do something in birth itself. And I think the same thing can be, extrapolated to so many situations like breastfeeding. You're not supposed to, give birth and then not everyone's able to automatically feed their
Feed
baby.
the baby.
It is a learned skill. It is a learned
Yeah.
skill. So
Yeah.
as with everything in birth and breastfeeding, please remember that your preparation needs to start at a very, very early point in pregnancy. Yes, I can give you like 3 easy tips and tools that anyone can use in labor, but for the best possible results, start early in pregnancy. That is my
So
top
is
tip.
it like some classes that they need to attend? Anything specific?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so childbirth preparation classes, and please remember that childbirth preparation classes with an independent childbirth educator is what is necessary. You hear of a lot of shortcuts and a lot of boot camps where things, you're being told that you're going to be thoroughly prepared for your birth after a 3-hour class or a 4-hour class. That is not sufficient. Childbirth classes at the birth home, for example, are 20 hours long, broken down into 6 sessions, and that is comprehensive. That is the amount of preparation that will then equip you with all the tools that you need to manage during pregnancy, during birth, and postpartum. We prepare a client to go through every stage of it, not just focusing on labor alone, not just focusing on fitness in pregnancy alone, but the whole process. We are so focused on pregnancy for those initial 8 to 9 months, and then suddenly you have a new baby and you're feeling very lost. You don't feel adequately prepared for postpartum. So
Yeah.
postpartum preparation is as important during the childbirth classes as is anything else.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I think that will be very, very useful. So moving on to just breastfeeding, we will discuss breastfeeding a bit and probably look at questions that have come in.
Yes,
Okay,
I'm
so when
very
we're talking
interested
about
to.
yeah, so when you're talking about breastfeeding, because I'm hoping like breastfeeding is something that like a lot more moms will also benefit here. So my own journey, I breastfed my son till 3 years, and it was really, really beautiful experience for me. I never wanted to stop. But I did, like you said, it's a learned skill. There was a lot of the first 3 days at the hospital were like a big struggle, and the nurse rushing in every 2-3 hours to trying to help us to do it, and trying to wake him up. There are so many myths. The demand feeding. Some people say wake the baby. Some people say don't wake the baby. Feed only when the baby wants. There's so much of confusion. But and again, my milk supply was low initially, so it was connected. I don't know whether it was connected to being, having a C-section or being on too many antibiotics and things like that. But initial 10 days was a little bit difficult, but after that I didn't have any issues, like started reading about it, trying to do stuff. So, so the first thing is, what would you tell people as to why breastfeeding is important?
I think thankfully there's a lot more awareness about why breastfeeding is important. We all know that breast milk contains that unique mix of nutrients that are perfect for your baby. Each mother's milk is perfect for their own babies. However, this doesn't mean that it's made breastfeeding any easier. Now, there's a lot more pressure on you to breastfeed from the care providers as well as family members and yourself. Women put a lot of pressure on themselves also to make sure breastfeeding is going well. As with anything else, you have to start in pregnancy. There is nothing that is going to make it easier for you after your baby is born. The way feeling prepared will make you. If you have
Yeah.
breastfeeding preparation done in pregnancy, you have a lot of foundation to build on. And even if you experience some difficulties in the postpartum period, just because you've done breastfeeding preparation doesn't mean that, you know, it should be like automatically easy. But if you
Yeah.
do experience some difficulties, you know what to do, you know who to reach out to, you will have lactation consultants, you know that they will be able to help, etc. and etc.
So,
as with
when we
everything
talk
else, it
about
starts in pregnancy.
lactation, sorry, when we're talking about lactation consultants itself, so what all can they help in, Meghna, with respect to breastfeeding?
So lactation consultants, again, you know, beginning from pregnancy itself, you can go attend a breastfeeding preparation class. This is what I tell someone, even if they're calling us at 39 weeks and they are, you know, wondering, they've just found out about the birth home and they're wondering what support they can access. We say at the very least, please attend a breastfeeding preparation class. And that's what lactation consultants do. At the birth home, we have a group lactation practice where we have 3 lactation consultants, and we are doing home visits, we are doing online classes, we are doing phone consults, in-person consults at the birth home. There is a lactation lounge where people can come and you know, work with a lactation consultant for 3 to 4 hours in a day also, if they're experiencing like a really complicated challenge. With all of this, we are able to, you know, make sure that people are getting to where they want to get in their lactation journey. Again, it's completely the client's decision. It is very unethical to say, even if a woman doesn't want to breastfeed, then she should be doing it.
True, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely understand that. But my case was quite opposite, you know, like I stopped because there were a lot of people telling that why are you feeding him, you know, at 3 years. And there are also a lot of funny myths associated with the breastfeeding itself, right? That after a year, whatever you're giving is only water. It's not going to give any strength to the child. You know, and and things like that. So, you know, like it's formula milk is better. So there are a lot of confusing myths. I guess a lactation counsel will help in all of these things and understanding, and even extended breastfeeding, you know, into probably
Yes.
I guess people even feed into the 4th year of the child, and then the weaning starts naturally.
Even longer. So
Longer,
extended breastfeeding by itself, you know, somehow tells us that something is going on for longer than it should have. I really like the term natural weaning or natural term breastfeeding, which is, you know, which basically means that baby will nurse till they want to wean, and it is completely appropriate, it is developmentally appropriate for a child to want to nurse as long as they nurse, and it is not harmful. You should stop looking at toddler nursing as something harmful. I have a 4-year-old and we are still nursing. I've had friends who've nursed, you know, if they have 2 children, then they've nursed for a total of 7 or 8 years between both the children. I think just, you know, not having any stigma around breastfeeding older child is very important, because breast milk continues to be nutritious, continues to have important antibodies. I have a friend who was recently telling me, oh, I wish I was still nursing, then I wouldn't be so worried about the, you know, current infection out there, because breast milk has proven, there are a lot of studies and research happening right now where they're looking at, you know, breast milk, the antibodies in breast milk, and wondering if it could possibly hold a cure for COVID. Breast milk, till now there has been no, you know, for example, cases of the coronavirus being transmitted through breast milk, and this is true for a variety of other illnesses, that if the mother is unwell with something, it is extremely unlikely that it transmits to the baby through breast milk, except of course through the breast milk, except of course HIV, which we know, you know, travels through body fluids. Other than that, there are very, very few instances where it is harmful for the mother to feed the baby. In fact, the opposite happens, that if I, for example, have a strep throat and I'm really like struggling with it, my body will have naturally produced antibodies for that, you know, virus, and that is passed on to the baby. So the baby is getting antibodies even without being exposed to the infection, which is simply amazing. So breast milk definitely doesn't turn to water after 1 year. And it has a lot of important antibodies and a lot of important nutrients that continue to nourish the toddler brain or the preschooler brain. And there's no reason for you to stop because of external pressure. Of course, we always tell mothers that, that it takes two to breastfeed. So it's not just the child, but if the mother themselves is experiencing intense nursing aversions, with an older child especially, then they can choose gentle weaning, no harsh weaning techniques, but choose gentle weaning to then sort of slowly be done with the whole process. But yes, benefits are still there.
So I think that's the best immunity for the child ever, and I guess it's also more about the comfort for the child. Like a lot of them just. I remember whenever my son used to get hurt, also used to come running to just feed.
Yes.
More of a comfort feeling for the child. So anything you would like, any funny moment that you would want to share that has happened during a birth or at birthing home, during any of the consultations, anything funny?
To be honest, we are always having a good time. We really enjoy the consults. There are, especially when we start talking about, the history of the client. So in the very first appointment, we have a detailed client information form that we fill out that we are asking them about their, how they met and how long they've been married, their health history, their mental, emotional history, all of it. And there's usually a lot of anecdotes being shared, a lot of, just light-hearted moments that happen during the day. So nothing particularly stands out, but I have to share this, and I think our midwife would also want me to share this. We recently read a scan report from someone who was just a few weeks pregnant, about 12 weeks pregnant, and we noticed this sentence in the scan report that said unstable lie, and the position of the baby was marked as unstable lie, and we just had it was just so hilarious because at this point the baby is 5 or 6 centimeters big, and you're talking about how the baby is in an unstable lie, and it is just so unfortunate because what is the mother supposed to feel when she looks at her scan report and
how it acts on her
unstable
mind?
lie? Yes, so it's hilarious and it's very unfortunate at the same time, but yeah, we did have a hearty laugh over that.
Okay, so the last question from my side is on not everyone is going to reach out to, they don't have birthing centers around, so most of the avenues are going to a doctor and a hospital, and we also discussed it how difficult it is to choose a doctor. So would you give any advice or any thoughts on what can you ask your doctor to know if she or he is the right one for you at that point of time?
Yes, I can definitely talk a little bit about how to choose a doctor. I have to add that even if you don't have a birth center in your city, most birth centers in the country take out of city clients. So we have heard of a lot of women who've traveled, for example, from Bangalore before we had a birth center in Bangalore to the other cities with birth centers. So that's always an option. Please reach out to the birth centers that are closest to you and see if that's something you want to explore. Second is we have a lot of birth workers in India. It is not just the birth centers and the midwives that can help you. There are lots of birth workers in many cities all around the country. There are birth networks in many cities. Please reach out to an independent birth worker or a birth network in your city, and they'll be able to help you with doctor referrals, with how to prepare during pregnancy. And these independent birth workers are out there trying to create awareness about birth all the time. There are so many pages, so many groups available on Facebook. There's always someone available to help you. You can also reach out to us even if you're not in Bangalore, and even if you're not planning to come to Bangalore. We can definitely put you in touch with other people. Bangalore Birth Network is currently running a helpline to help women through just figure out all of this during the pandemic. So that's a great resource. reach out to your local
Nice.
birth network. That's
Nice.
what I would say. And reach out to a birth center. They can definitely help you out. You don't have to be from the same city to contact a birth center.
All right. Okay. So I'm just going to see what are the questions now.
Sure.
Fully informed choice is the need of the hour. Absolutely. So if one needs to reach birth home, should we be meeting them from the beginning of the pregnancy, or which month should we come and meet you guys if we want to go for a natural?
So we see clients from as early as their first pregnancy test. Sometimes even before. We have a lot of clients come to us who are not even pregnant yet, but who want to make sure that they are doing things right even before they start. So you can reach out to us at any point in your pregnancy or preconception as well. We have preconception counseling available. If someone's, working through some fertility treatments, we have counseling available as support through that as well. In terms of accepting clients into our care, we do that at any point in early pregnancy. But we do have a 35-week cutoff because we need to see clients for a certain number of consults, get to know them to get to know us and the midwife, and to build this mutual trust, which is a great foundation, which is a very important foundation for midwifery care. To do that adequately, we do have a 35-week cutoff, which, if we have a client coming to us who are 38 or 39 weeks pregnant, sadly, we are not able to accept them into our care at that point. So, however, we also do co-care for hospital births. So there's still something that you can, still some kind of support and service that you can access from us. So there's no need to hesitate. You can definitely, people can definitely reach out to us at any point through their reproductive journey, preconception, pregnant or postpartum. We always have something that we can offer to make their lives a little better. Even if you are having a known high-risk pregnancy, for example, like the birth home is a low-risk model. So if someone's having uncontrolled gestational diabetes, they can't birth with us because that is still, that falls under the high-risk category. They can still reach out to us because we can, like I said, we have a lot of support available which they can still make use of. So the best thing to do is just give us a call, and we will create a personalized plan of care for every client that, that comes to us, that has in it things that will help them specifically.
Nice, nice. One more question has come on epidural. Should we take an epidural or should we avoid it?
With most other things in pregnancy, where if you ask me, but if the mother themselves is experiencing intense nursing aversion, with an older child especially, then they can choose gentle weaning, no harsh weaning techniques, but choose gentle weaning to then sort of slowly be done with the whole process. But yes, benefits are still there.
So I think that's the best immunity for the child ever, and I guess it's also more about the comfort for the child. Like a lot of them just. I remember whenever my son used to get hurt, also used to come running to just feed.
Yes.
So more of a comfort feeling for the child. So anything you would like, any funny moment that you would want to share that has happened during a birth or at birthing home, during any of the consultations, anything funny?
To be honest, we are always having a good time. We really enjoy the consults. There are, especially when we start talking about, the history of the client. So in the very first appointment, we have a detailed client information form that we fill out, that we are asking them about their, how they met and how long they've been married, their health history, their mental, emotional history, all of it. And there's usually a lot of anecdotes being shared, a lot of, just light-hearted moments that happen during the day. So nothing particularly stands out, but I have to share this, and I think our midwife would also want me to share this. We recently read a scan report from someone who was just a few weeks pregnant, about 12 weeks pregnant, and we noticed this sentence in the scan report that said unstable lie, and we just the position of the baby was marked as unstable lie, and we just had it was just so hilarious, because at this point the baby is 5 or 6 centimeters big, and you're talking about how the baby is in an unstable lie, and it is just so unfortunate, because what is the mother supposed to feel when she looks at her scan report and
how it acts on her
unstable
mind,
lie? Yes, so it's hilarious and it's very unfortunate at the same time, but yeah, we did have a hearty laugh over that.
Okay, so the last question from my side is on not everyone is going to reach out to, they don't have birthing centers around, so most of the avenues are going to a doctor and a hospital, and we also discussed it how difficult it is to choose a doctor. So would you give any advice or any thoughts on what can you ask your doctor to know if she or he is the right one for you at that point of time?
Yes, I can definitely talk a little bit about how to choose a doctor. I have to add that even if you don't have a birth center in your city, most birth centers in the country take out of city clients. So we have heard of a lot of women who've traveled, for example, from Bangalore, before we had a birth center in Bangalore, to the other cities with birth centers. So that's always an option. Please reach out to the birth centers that are closest to you and see if that's something you want to explore. Second is, we have a lot of birth workers in India. It is not just the birth centers and the midwives that can help you. There are lots of birth workers in many cities all around the country. There are birth networks in many cities. Please reach out to an independent birth worker or a birth network in your city, and they'll be able to help you with doctor referrals, with how to prepare during pregnancy. And these independent birth workers are out there trying to create awareness about birth all the time. There are so many pages, so many groups available on Facebook. There's always someone available to help you. You can also reach out to us, even if you're not in Bangalore, and even if you're not planning to come to Bangalore. We can definitely put you in touch with other people. Bangalore Birth Network is currently running a helpline to help women through just figure out all of this during the pandemic. So that's a great resource. Reach out to your local birth network. That's what I would say. And reach out to a birth center. They can definitely help you out. You don't have to be from the same city to contact a birth center.
All right, okay. So I'm just going to see what are the questions now.
Sure.
Fully informed choice is the need of the hour. Absolutely. So if one needs to reach birth home, should we be meeting them from the beginning of the pregnancy, or which month should we come and meet you guys if we want to go for a natural?
So we see clients from as early as their first pregnancy test. Sometimes even before. We have a lot of clients come to us who are not even pregnant yet, but who want to make sure that they are doing things right even before they start. So you can reach out to us at any point in your pregnancy or preconception as well. We have preconception counseling available. If someone's working through some fertility treatments, we have counseling available as support through that as well. In terms of accepting clients into our care, we do that at any point in early pregnancy. But we do have a 35-week cutoff, because we need to see clients for a certain number of consults, get to know them to get to know us and the midwife, and to build this mutual trust, which is a great foundation, which is a very important foundation for midwifery care. To do that adequately, we do have a 35-week cutoff, which, if we have a client coming to us who are 38 or 39 weeks pregnant, sadly, we are not able to accept them into our care at that point. So, however, we also do co-care for hospital births. So there's still something that you can, still some kind of support and service that you can access from us. So there's no need to hesitate. You can definitely, people can definitely reach out to us at any point through their reproductive journey, preconception, pregnant or postpartum. We always have something that we can offer to make their lives a little better. Even if you are having a known high-risk pregnancy, for example, like the birth home is a low-risk model. So if someone's having uncontrolled gestational diabetes, they can't birth with us because that is still, that falls under the high-risk category. They can still reach out to us because we can, like I said, we have a lot of support available which they can still make use of. So the best thing to do is just give us a call, and we will create a personalized plan of care for every client that, that comes to us, that has in it things that will help them specifically.
Nice, nice. One more question has come on epidural. Should we take an epidural or should we avoid it?
With most other things in pregnancy, where if you ask me, is natural birth the better option, which was a question that you asked earlier on, Shamla, or is C-section safer? There is no blanket answers. Epidurals are not good or bad. Epidurals are emergency medical help, which should be used only when absolutely necessary. Taking epidurals as, again, as a very casual factor, saying, sure, if you know that you are struggling with pain, then it's okay to take an epidural. I feel that's a little different. Hi. I think we went over.
Hi, I think
time limit.
over, but we thought we can discuss for some more time. There were a lot of other questions too. So, guys who join now, so please do type in your questions again because many of them have it's just gone with the previous chat. So, anyone wants, please do type in your questions. Yeah, please tell us, Meghna, about epidural.
So epidurals are not good or bad in themselves. Epidurals are, emergency medical intervention, and it should be used when there is a need for it. One of the few scenarios in which, for example, we may talk about epidurals are if it's been a really long labor. And when I say really long labor, mostly we are referring to a really long labor in a safe and supported environment, not just in in a hospital, because it's a lot more challenging to be in a really long labor in a hospital without the right support. So we're talking about a really long labor at the center, and the mother's like clearly tired, or there's a lot of intense contractions and she's not getting a break at all. In that, we would say, okay, an epidural makes sense. But as a standard that, epidurals are just being advertised as being a pain-free mechanism to give birth, I think that is a bit concerning. Anything that is a medical intervention, we should look at the pros and cons of it and the necessity of it for that particular situation and then take a call. Again, the best thing to do would be to gather all the information about epidurals, understand what an epidural is and what it will do for you in pregnancy itself. So in labor, when you are faced with the decision of saying yes or no to an epidural, you have all the information.
Nice. Okay. So another question with respect to breastfeeding, are you doing home consultations on breastfeeding right now during this time? Right
now, we are not doing home visits as a standard. Up till the lockdown, we were always happy to offer a home visit or an in-person consult at the clinic as necessary. Currently, we are taking everything on a case-by-case basis. If there is someone who absolutely requires a home visit, then we do have adequate personal protection equipment that we use, all the masks and the gloves that are necessary to keep the interaction safe, and we may offer a home visit, but unfortunately we are not able to offer it to just about anyone who wants it. So the way we are working with this right now is we do an initial video consult for everyone who's contacting us. Video consults are great, they are helpful, they will very likely solve whatever situation you're in. So please, I'm asking everyone who's considering a breastfeeding consult, don't disregard video consults. They can be a great tool for you to safely get the help that you need. But if there is additional help that is required, even with beyond the video consult, at that point is when we would talk about either an in-person consult at the birth home or a home visit. But the first step is a video consult for now.
Nice.
And when the situation changes, if we have, things changing, we are happy to start offering home visits again.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully it's changing soon. Yeah. Guys, whoever has joined, please do type in your questions again. So another question on weaning. Could you please provide examples for gentle weaning? I guess she means probably the mechanism. Aarti has asked. So is there anything that they can do for gentle weaning? Because I also found it quite difficult to wean my child. Yeah, so I think that will be helpful if you can tell us.
Sure. So the WHO recommendation is that exclusive breastfeeding till six months, and it is really good for you to continue nursing till at least 2 years of baby's age. So I would suggest till 2 years. If you're having any concerns and you're feeling like weaning, please reach out to a lactation consultant to resolve it so you can continue nursing. But definitely after 2 years, if you want to start thinking of weaning, that's completely fine. Looking at weaning again as a single step process with a single goal is very overwhelming and challenging. Look at it, break it down into many different steps. Maybe you want to start with partial weaning. Maybe you want to do just day wean first or night wean first. For example, I found it very challenging with a young baby during the day because, there would be a lot of demands for nursing. I found the best way to just leave the house, not stay at home during the afternoon time at all, but instead go out on play dates. So there's a lot of other engagement happening and the focus on nursing is a little lesser. And once I realized that that was kind of working, because after 2 years of age, they're not really depending on you entirely for their nutrition. They're eating a lot of solid foods. So some nursing with some solid food is a great mix to have. So I gently started, using limits. So I would say, for example, we'll only nurse for a minute and after that we'll pause and move on to something else. This of course needs to sit on a foundation of communication with your child. If you have had gentle communication and if you follow gentle parenting practices for the most part of your parenting, then your child knows that they can trust you, that you're telling them the truth, that you're not trying to pretend that it's a different situation. Scaring the child and telling them that they're going to hurt mommy if they keep nursing and that, they've already hurt the nipple or putting a band-aid on it, which many people recommend, is unfortunately very harsh.
Yeah.
And what does that make the child think? That they have this simple need and that is hurting the mother. So instead of that, you can be very direct with the child and say, you know what, after a minute, I find it very difficult to sit and hold you because you're growing now, you're a bigger baby now. So we'll nurse for a minute and then we'll put a stop to it. Or you put a limit that says we'll only nurse on the bed. So if you're sitting on the couch, no nursing, we'll only nurse on the bed. Some people choose to day wean by saying we'll only nurse when the sun goes down. Or some people choose to night wean by saying we'll only nurse when the sun comes up. So using examples that your child will understand, putting gentle boundaries in place after 2 years, you can start counting. We did a lot of that. We counted to 15 and then we would stop nursing. Then we reduced that number to 10, 5, slowly weaned off day nursing. In the night, once they are older and they're more ready to stop nursing so much in the night, they will let you know. You as a mother will know that they are finally ready for some gentle boundaries to be put.
Nice.
So there are a lot of resources. You can definitely join some of the support groups because there's no one solution that works for everyone. Hear a lot of different perspectives and try them out one at a time. Read a little, do a little. When you start trying to employ every tool available, that's very overwhelming for you and baby. So read a little, do a little, join support groups, read a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of support groups, they've been like really helpful in my journey too, like, on Facebook or Instagram. A lot of people are out there sharing their own experiences and journeys. I think that's been helpful in this age, rather than when like long time back. Yeah. So another thing on breastfeeding itself, how do I know that the baby is full or the supply is sufficient for me? That I'm providing my baby enough?
Yeah. Very, very often, frequently asked question. There is no scale that will tell us if baby has had enough. Why are we even looking at if baby has had enough? Many mothers are worried that they are not making enough milk. Unfortunately, there isn't enough, like again, good examples to counter that. There's a lot of examples where we read about women saying, I didn't have milk at all for the few days, or my body just wouldn't make milk. My baby would keep crying even if I fed him or her all the time, which means that I didn't have enough milk. The only way to make sure that baby is doing well, and I'm not saying this is a way to make sure baby is getting enough milk, because that comparison shouldn't be there, but the only way to make sure that baby is doing well in newborn days is to track the poop and the pee counts. So 6 full diapers and 3 poops, and there are different considerations how it is a few weeks after birth. It will change after a few weeks after birth. There are some great resources, maybe we can link them somewhere, Shamla, so people can access it.
Yes, we can.
They can also give us a call.
Insta Live link and also on Facebook.
Yeah.
Can do that.
Because it's a little too detailed to get into, but to put it very simply, don't focus so much about if the baby's had enough or not. Babies cry for a lot of different reasons. They cry for comfort, they cry for food, they cry if they're sleepy, they cry if they're tired, cranky. The best thing to do is, when you're in the newborn days, offer to nurse whenever there is a demand. You don't have to stop thinking baby will have too much or too little. The more you nurse, the more your body knows to produce milk. It is a demand and a supply situation. So rather than focusing on do we know if baby has enough, we will shift that question to seeing how is baby doing. Is baby doing well? If baby is not doing well, then what needs to change? If baby is too cranky by the time you're beginning nursing and it's like completely like crying its head off, sometimes it may be a case of the baby's already started showing signs of hunger, but it has been missed, and by the time you're offering to nurse, the baby is in a full-blown tantrum situation. So identifying hunger signs is a great thing. Whenever you feel like baby wants to nurse, offer nursing first, and if the baby doesn't want to feed, that's fine. If the baby wants to feed, that's fine too.
Nice.
So I would orient that question a bit.
Okay. So I think there's one more question on when should one start weaning, but that I guess you already covered, right? You said it depends on the baby, and probably 2 years you can start. Do you suggest a feeding pillow for breastfeeding?
It is not mandatory.
Okay.
You don't have to absolutely buy it as a necessary thing in pregnancy. You can manage without it, but in some cases it can be quite handy. It's not a mandatory purchase. But postpartum, if you feel the need for it, they are very easily available. You can even find, other friends who've had feeding pillows who'll give, hand them down to you. So don't buy a lot of paraphernalia. You don't need much. to do, to take care of your baby, not just with breastfeeding, but in general. You don't need a crib, and, you don't need a lot of different kind of sleeping surfaces like a bouncer or a walker and all of that. The best thing for baby in the first few weeks is to just be with you. And if you're able to manage to nurse without a feeding pillow, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't really make a difference.
So I have very less milk. How do I improve my supply? I don't want to give formula.
Again, a frequently asked question. It's totally okay to, feel that way. I would strongly recommend reaching out to a lactation consultant, because breast milk does work in a demand and supply kind of a format. So even if there is one volume of formula being given, that can hinder the breast milk production. So, and again, trying to just do it all yourself, trying to wean off formula and trying to figure out what's happening with breastfeeding all by yourself can be a bit overwhelming. Best thing to do is reach out to a lactation consultant. A simple phone call will then put to rest a lot of the fears and concerns you have about breastfeeding and just make you a more confident person. And you'll be able to nurse a lot more, and automatically the more you nurse, the more milk you make.
Nice. Okay. So again, a breastfeeding question itself. So is there a relation between the milk that we have and the milk that we can produce for feeding? What do we do in case we opt for vegan pregnancy?
And the first part of the question is a little confusing.
So I'll just read out. The question is from Rashmi. Is there a relation between the milk we drink throughout life and the milk that is produced after pregnancy? If we have more milk, does it increase?
I think if you're talking about the relation between cow's milk or other plant-based milks and breast milk, there's a world of a difference, because breast milk, like we said, is uniquely created to cater to your baby. It will have that unique mix of nutrients that your baby's body needs, and there's antibodies that your baby's body needs, and there's absolutely no comparison between cow milk or plant-based milk and breast milk. Of course, we know breast milk is always good for the baby. Your own breast milk, and if there is an absolute need, sometimes you have other concerns, then you can also opt for donated breast milk. That's also a good option.
That's a great option.
I think the order should be breast milk on top, then donor milk, then ethically produced formulas only when absolutely necessary. Cow's milk is not safe for baby under 6 months of age. Cow's milk is not great for the human body in general, because our bodies were not designed to digest cow's milk. This unfortunately is a big misconception that everyone needs to drink milk, and especially pregnant women and postpartum mothers absolutely have to drink a glass of cow's milk. No, drinking more cow's milk will not produce more breast milk. The only thing that can actively aid or hinder the supply of breast milk is how much you're nursing. The more you nurse, the more milk you produce.
More you will get.
The less you're nursing and the less anything's happening to kind of hinder the nursing process, the more the body starts to think, oh, maybe the baby doesn't need all that much breast milk after all. So let me stop producing breast milk.
Thanks a lot, Meghna. I'm just seeing whether we've not covered anything.
We have Sapna Krishnan on the comments. Sapna is one of the lactation consultants at the birth home. We have Anaga and Chetna along. They make up our group lactation practice. My other partner in the birth home, Shagufta Parveen, is also an IBCLC. So we have a lot of great people on the team, and I'm very proud to be a part of this team.
It's a very nice and awesome thing to do also. Like I was saying, right, when it opened, I was like really happy that there are options even in Bangalore. Okay, I guess we have covered all the questions. So any more question, guys, you can always ping us on Instagram or ping both home directly, and Meghna, I think, will be very, very happy to answer. Meghna, thanks a lot for providing us with all of this information. I'm sure a lot of the moms found it very useful. Our understanding of birth, how we can go about it, and even the breastfeeding journey, and how it can be much easier when we can reach out to guys who understand it better than us.
Thank you, Shamla. This was a lot of fun, and I'm very, I was very impressed by how many interesting questions we have. I think with answering one question, we are able to give answers to 20 other people who probably had the same question in their mind.
True.
So we love questions at the birth home, and yes, we are absolutely happy to be contacted. Finishing note, I would say, doesn't matter at what point you are in your conception journey, preconception, pregnancy, or postpartum, we can always help you out with whatever it is you're dealing with at that time. We have everyone on the team, right from preconception counselors all the way to perinatal mental health experts. We cover lactation, we cover fitness, physiotherapy, midwifery care, doula care. It really is an endless list, and I am very, very non-humbly so very proud of the team that we have at the birth home. We have 11-member team with consists of all of these
Awesome.
different birth workers and health professionals. So yeah, we're happy to help.
Thank you, Meghna. Thanks a lot. Catch up with you again soon.
Very welcome. All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Shamla.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Bye, guys, for joining. Bye.